This is the City of Delaware Historic Preservation Commission meeting of November 29th, 2017. Could we call the roll, please?
Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Mr. Nicely?
Here.
Ms. Riviera? Ms. Van Gundy?
Here.
Councilman Rohr?
Here.
Vice Chairman Hatton? Chairman Koch?
Here. Could I have a motion to excuse Ms. Riviera and Mr. Hatton as they called in ahead of time?
So moved. Second.
Have a meeting by a motion by Mr. Coleman and a second by Mr. Rohr. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Yes.
Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
Chairman Koch?
Yes. Item 2 on the agenda is approval of the motion summary of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting held on October 25th, 2017, as recorded and transcribed. Have you all had an opportunity to review the motion summary, and are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nicely.
I'll let somebody else here a second.
Well, you were there. I'll second.
Second by Ms. Van Gundy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Abstain.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Yes.
Councilman Rohr?
Abstain.
Chairman Koch?
Yes.
Excuse me. The simple majority.
I think
Um,
we're okay.
You vote abstain.
Well, if there's
Well,
The two out were here.
It's
Well, that's a
still
good question.
It's
three of them.
majority.
Well, you got a quorum, so.
We should be okay.
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 If for some reason we were wrong, it'll be on the agenda next month too.
Fair enough.
Okay.
It's fine.
Item 3 on the agenda is regular business agenda. Item 3A, application 2017-2923. It's a request by Jill Rice for an informal review for the proposed demolition and reconstruction of 50 West William Street, which is zone B3 in the Community Business District and located in the transitional sub-district of the Downtown Historic District overlay. We have a staff report.
Yes, we do. As you indicated, project site is at 50 West William Street on the north side of on the west side of North Franklin Street between West William and West Winter. And the properties to the west are outside of the Downtown Historic District overlay, so it is right on the boundary. As you indicated, the zoning of the property is B3, as the properties to the northwest and south, and properties immediately to the east are zoned B2, which is the Central Business District. And the property is not included in the National Register Historic Northwest District. Some background on the properties, or on the property. These are the various maps. The property sits on a 50 by 100 foot parcel on the northwest corner of the intersection of William and Franklin, and has been vacant for approximately 5 years. And as you can see, the property is in a deteriorated condition. It is not the original structure on this parcel. A little interesting history. The lot is located on the 1808 plat map of the town of Delaware. And The first William Street Methodist Church was built on that site in 1821. The lot was actually owned by Moses Bixby, the founder of the city of Delaware. And the church was completed in 1824. And then the building was sold to the city schools, and it was a school from 1845 to 1855 when the board sold it to the city of Delaware. And then the second floor was used for council chambers and a jail, and the ground floor was used as a market house and later as an engine house for the city's fire department. And then it served as the city hall until 1880, and it was demolished in 1884. And so this was something new that I had learned. And then you can see here where this is from a late 1800s photograph, and the parcel that we're talking about this evening is right here, and you can see that it is vacant. All right, and now we are going to be fast forwarding to 1926, and the project site has a uniquely shaped building that was constructed in 1926 as a Sohio gas station. And these are various photographs of the site throughout time. We have a circa 1940s photograph showing the Sohio gas station. And then 1950 and into the 1960s. And then the gas station was on that corner until the mid-1970s. And then in the early 1990s, the building was purchased actually by the current property owner, who is Dave Hudson. And he owned and operated his Mid-Ohio Printing Company from the site. And he was at that corner until 2013, when he put it up for sale. And in the summer of 2013, I'm not sure if you recall, the property came before the Historic Preservation Commission as it was purchased by the owner and manager of the Pulp Smoothie and Juice Bar. And the renovation plan was presented to HPC in August 2013, and approvals were obtained for renovation of the facade, new signage, and a site plan. This is the site plan here. And then unfortunately, the project did not come to fruition because of financial difficulties of that particular owner. Construction was started, but abruptly was terminated, and the property was returned to the previous owner, which was David Hudson, who reassumed ownership, put the property back up to sale. And in the meantime, the building, continued to deteriorate. And the applicant, who is here this evening, currently has a purchase option on this particular property, and is appearing before HPC to solicit comments for possible demolition of the property and reconstruction of a new mixed-use commercial site. And so the applicants have been, very diligent in communicating with the city, finding out the various processes that need to be accomplished. And they hope to open up a small boutique fitness studio with residential use on the second floor. And plans are to offer personalized fitness and exercise programs to patient referrals, and also offer classes to public. And, as we said, the applicant has been exercising due diligence in assessment of the property. And due to its current condition, and in order to comply with current code standards, city staff believes that the most prudent avenue to take would be the demolition of this particular property and rebuilding on the site. And in addition, since the site is a former gas station, the applicants are also, again, doing due diligence and have arranged a phase 1 environmental assessment on the site as well. And they have gone to the extent of hiring an architect and also obtaining opinions of cost from contractors on the various options. And so to present to you this evening is option 1, which would be the repairing and remodeling of the existing building with a new construction addition. The second option would be to demolish the existing building and construct a new 1-story building. And then finally, option 3 would be the demolition of the existing building and construct a new 2-story building, which would be the preferred option for the applicants. And this would be constructed on the site plan that has already been approved for the site as well. And by adding a residential component to this property, because it is currently zoned B3, where a residential use isn't permitted, if all plans are, agreeable to HPC, they would need to request a rezoning of this particular site to B2. And, as previously indicated, the B2 district is directly across the street from this site. And further staff analysis, we have found that the building on the site is in an unsightly and unfinished condition. While that property was under construction, I was able to go into the site along with the chief building official, and to put it bluntly, it's basically butchered up on the inside. Every wall, every ceiling, every floor, has been compromised. And it's, as we have stated, it would just be more cost effective to go ahead and demolish the building and start again. And in addition, with it being on the extreme western boundary of the historic district, it's in the transitional sub-district. And so to move forward, with the proposed plan or preferred option of, building a new 2-story building, it would still provide that appropriate transition between the central business district and the surrounding residential district. A 2-story building would be an appropriate scale for this particular site because it is surrounded by multi-floored, multi-storied buildings on all sides. And the proposed use of the building would be appropriate for the quiet enjoyment, of the surrounding district as well. And building is not original to the site. There's no longer any historical or architecturally significant features that might have been on that building. It's been covered with modern materials, and in addition, everything is, again, in a poor state. And in order to, allow the demolition, the city ordinance, does allow demolition of a substandard structure in the historic district. And that would be, following section 1190.07. And if agreeable to proceed, the applicant would follow the prescribed procedure of complying with one or both conditions of that particular ordinance section. And finally, staff offers that when occupied and intact, this particular building, was excluded from inclusion in the National Register Historic District, due to its design and age. And now in its current condition, it could be, considered an intrusion, in our local historic district and the historic fabric of the nearby residential neighborhoods. So the city does not take demolition lightly in the historic district, but in this particular instance, it would support the demolition and reconstruction approach. And so at this time, we wish to remind you this is an informal review, and just basically wanting to get your opinions on a proposed demolition and reconstruction. And so the applicants are here, and we'd like to call them up to the front.
Would the applicant care to come up to the table and introduce yourself and give your address?
Sure, thank you.
Since this is an informal hearing, could you two guys take your ties off?
Making everybody nervous.
Yeah. Starting to think I'm in presence of lawyers.
Lock the door.
All right, good evening. I'm Jill Rice, and this is Jeff Rice. And we live at 6 Darlington Road. So the really, one of the biggest attractions to this particular site is we've lived at 6 Darlington Road now for almost 7 years, and it's 0.4 miles from our home. So we're parents to 4 children. So when I'm going to take you back to kind of the beginning of my thought process. I graduated from Kent State University, got a master's in exercise physiology, and right away after graduation, I started a fitness studio in Hudson, Ohio, actually in Fairlawn, Ohio, and owned that for about 4 years. And in that time, another gentleman that was running a similar studio asked if I would be interested in purchasing his studio. And so we were recently married, and we decided, yes, this is a good time to do that. So for about 10 years after college, I ran both studios. So I'm quite familiar with that type of business. I'm going to do a similar type of business, not exact, because that was about 10 years ago. So now that my little one's almost 5 years old, I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm ready to get back out there and get recertified in things. And I just love the fact that it's so close to our home, and Delaware has become our home. And I feel like that this would be a good opportunity for not only our family, so looking at a personal story, but as the community, and Jeff and I making this community more of a commitment to the community. I plan to do. I have lots of ideas of the type of classes I'm going to offer. It's going to be a studio that you come in with instruction. So either you're going to come in with a small group instruction and or one-on-one. So not competing with gyms that you just buy the membership, you come in and you can stay there as long as you want. I would like I'm using the word boutique. So it's going to be a little bit more individualized type of studio. And that's something that currently Delaware doesn't have. And I definitely think there's a market for that, not only for the individuals that are in their 30s, but all the way up to individuals, I would say, in their later life who possibly need, post-rehab type of training. So.
Diane, thank you for putting together that the information and history. That was really neat on the property. So yeah, Jill summarized everything perfectly in terms of our scope for the property. It actually changed initially when we went into contract on the property. We were like, well, this looks a little rough, but we've rehabbed some properties before. Let's put together a budget and see what it would cost to rehab this. And during the consultation of doing that, we found out that it's in worse shape than we really thought. And actually, after talking to a couple of architects as well as some general contractors, they said, hey, it's cost prohibitive to try and save a portion of this building. It's in very poor condition. You can see that one upper picture on the left there. Those poles are just temporary supports with literally with a piece of angle iron and ratchet straps holding up that whole southern portion of the building. So it's really unsafe in its current condition. So from there, from the initial plan of, hey, let's rehab this and let's do another studio like we talked about, it's grown to, well, it now makes sense for you guys to look at demoing this property. So since that decision was kind of made for us, we decided, well, if we have to demo the property, maybe we look to add additional benefits to the city. In talking with some people like Sean Hughes, one of the things that we were hearing was temporary housing could be a need for downtown. Specifically with Ohio Wesleyan, you have alumni coming in town, you have parents coming in for sporting events to see their children, and so we thought, hey, maybe an executive style rental, or two of them actually on the second floor, may make sense, to do something like that, may add some value. So that's where this has kind of grown to, and we're still figuring out some pieces exactly to what we may do there with the second story. But from what we understand, one of the first steps we have to do is have this meeting and get the informal slash maybe soon to be formal decision as to whether the city and historic preservation committee would allow such a demolition and a new build of the property. So I guess with that, we'll kind of open it up to you all to see if there's some questions we can maybe answer for you.
Commission members have any questions for either city staff or the applicant?
Yeah. With respect to the zoning change, obviously that's not our purview. The second story option, is that dependent upon getting the B2 residential zoning? Yeah. I agree that the two-story option would probably fit best in the sub-district. So I'm just curious, if you were not to obtain that B2 residential, does that mean that no longer is a viable option?
That's a good question. It is, and that, you know, some of the things that we've talked about, I mean, in terms of a business pro forma, it certainly changes things.
Sure.
You know, when we have to look at that. You know, the cost of demoing and building a one-story is significantly more than the cost of demoing and building a two-story in terms of cost per square footage and, you know, those things. So when we look at it from a business pro forma, if we add a second story, and we're thinking maybe potentially one of the units could actually be permanent resident for one of those units, starting to run those kinds of numbers, that helps the business make sense. If we're not able to do that and looking at some of these costs from some of these contractors, it might be tough to do it with a 1,600 square foot single story building in that space.
Right, but with the current zoning designation, that second story, you know, could also be a commercial or retail space.
Right.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for, yes, that's true. And I think the reason we didn't go to that immediately is it seems like there's some vacancy in downtown already for some office space. And so we wanted to see if we could maybe offer something a little bit different, which would require the B2 zoning.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, I have been inside this building and checked it out also, and I don't think there's anything, there's not enough left of anything historic that makes this even a questionable application for me. I think it would be an improvement to the area. What's there is not historic. All those little two roofs that are on the building currently were added in the 70s, and well, actually probably the 90s, and they're not historic. There's nothing left that's historic that's worth saving there, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I think I would wholeheartedly agree. I think if you look at the ordinance, I don't think I've ever seen a case that qualifies as universally as being a good candidate for demolition. I am curious if you have given any thought to what the look of the replacement building might be like.
Yeah, good question. We have, and we've talked with, I think we're going to ultimately work with Kara from Dave Kerr Architects. That's who we've been working with so far. So we definitely want it to fit into this area. So there would be the required mix of limestone that's required for the buildings, and it would probably have a brick veneer on the outside. So maybe not too dissimilar from the way Willis looks kind of next door with the brick building, and they've got limestone columns on the corner, dark black windows. So you know, maybe something along those lines. But you know, we certainly intend. You know, that's we live in one of the older homes here in Delaware, which we love, and so we fully support what you all do, and that's why we want to invest more in the community. So we absolutely want it to fit into the style. So I'm sure if this does get approved at this point, we'd be coming back to you all and saying, hey, here's a elevation. You know, does this meet all the requirements? And that's one of the reasons we really chose to partner with Dave Kerr, because being that they're local, you know, we're trusting their judgment on, okay, this, you know, you need this here and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
It should be noted, I just like to make note of the fact that the architectural, first of all, this commission, basically, we have to approve a demolition in the historic district, but beyond that, for new construction or renovation, we're concerned solely with the appearance of the building, not the interior layout or anything. So, and those architectural standards are published on the city website, so you can review them at your, and I'm sure Kara Herring is very familiar with them.
Are there underground storage tanks on that property? You guys know?
That's what we're trying to find out.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, exactly, we've been told that there aren't, by the current owner. He was told that they were removed, but we've hired a environmental company to do the EPA Phase 1 assessment. So far, they haven't been able to find any records of them actually being removed.
We're working with a center. It's called, their name is August Mack. And she hasn't given us the final papers on Phase 1. She really has been, it should have taken 10 days, but she's putting more time and effort trying to find something. If it comes back unknown, Jeff and I have been discussing how we're going to approach the buyer, and because we're just in contract at this time on
The seller?
or the seller of possibly looking into a Phase 2 to give that, because right now there's no guarantees. We're hearing that they've been removed, but she has not been able to find any paperwork proving that yet.
We assume that we're going to have to go into a Phase 2 assessment and actually do some soil sampling and do those types of things. We're at a point, as Jill just mentioned, of investigating all of that to the point where we found out that Craig Overturf still lives in the area. That was Overturf's gas station, from what I understand, in the 70s. He lives on South Section Line Road, and he just was sent a letter last week to see if he can help with any information. So, and she's been in touch, I think, with Jerry Warner as well. So we're fingers crossed. Nothing was found at the courthouse, but we're hoping we can find some record of the tanks being removed. But so far, we haven't been able to.
Diane, is this a photograph of Mr. Overturf on page 3 of the staff report? Cleaning a windshield on a 58 Chevy?
I wonder if it is.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure who that was. He looks very proud, though, of his automobile.
Could be.
Well, I don't know what other commission members feel, but I think depending on the appearance of the proposed construction, I think this would be an improvement to the neighborhood, frankly.
Certainly.
I think there's a lot of design decisions to be made.
Right.
I agree.
I agree.
Gosh, we're all in agreement. Oh, my goodness.
This is really just the opposite of the demolition subject that came up a couple of months ago. I mean, this is, I think, actually a good use of, that provision. And I personally walk by there quite frequently, at least once a week.
Okay.
We would be excited to see something more harmonious with the neighborhood on that lot.
Right.
And occupied.
Yeah, we see the potential there, and the fact that it has the parking spaces in front, I think is a real benefit to the property. But the structure as it sits is just really not usable at all. So we would like to do the same. We walk by it often as well and think it's a little bit of an eyesore until you get to the nicer part of downtown, But so we're excited about it, and by all means would want it to fit into the area.
Well, there's nothing to vote on. You're just looking for an informal feedback, and it seems that we're all in agreement that, go for it.
Okay.
Good luck. Hope there's no underground tanks, and
Nice.
Yes.
It's a great location.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Wish you great
Yeah,
success.
best wishes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
And so the next step would be Lance Schultz, our zoning administrator, asked if you would call him tomorrow and set up an appointment with him to discuss the rest of the development process. And then you would need to come back formally before the commission with your final design, final building materials, final colors.
Okay.
Right, and
So that would happen after we probably purchase it, when we make the purchase agreement, right?
yeah,
When it's exchanged, after it's exchanged hands to us.
yes, yeah. And I'm not sure how quickly you want to move on that until you want to wait until
Right.
after you get your environmental assessments.
That's exactly, I think if we're looking at a little bit of a timeline, we need to figure out the EPA stuff right now. So we may have to renegotiate the contract slightly to do that. But that's what we feel our next step, so that we know we've got a clean property.
Mhm.
And then once we have that, then I think we'll come back with a formal application and the formal request. Now, will that be a two-stage process? Will it be a formal request for demo and then come back and a formal request to build the two-story structure?
No,
Can it be done in one?
in one,
Okay.
correct.
Conversely, though, do they have the option of doing it in a two-stage if that at some point becomes more, to keep their project going? If, the design's not locked in, would they be able to obtain the demo to get that portion going if they wanted to?
Yes, right, I'm right. We could set it up
Yeah.
as a two-stage if you
Yeah.
wanted to. But if
Okay.
you wish to expedite, we could do it in one.
Okay.
If I could too, just as my standard comment every time someone's here is when you offer the proposal with the new design for the new construction, just as a reminder that you want to be as detailed as possible with specific colors, specific dimensions, and specific styles and sizes of all the different aspects. Makes it a lot easier for us to be able to evaluate it. So there won't be any risk of having to send it back for further information, or at least not as much of a risk, I would say.
Okay.
Good.
We were planning on bringing Kara with us to that next meeting. So
Yeah.
it'll be on paper, but hopefully she'll be here too with us to maybe have those
Oh, yeah.
details.
Yeah, I know she's very familiar with the process too.
Yeah. And she lives in the community too, so it's one thing that keeps us with her. She
Makes
too
sense.
has a desire to, make it look good. I want it to look like it's been there. It's been there for a while, ideally.
Well, you got that now.
In a good way. In a good way. I want it to look old and good.
So, does the commission have any preference for the type of materials to be seen?
Well, when you review the architectural standards, assuming you haven't already, I think you'll find that the criteria is basically for new construction in the historic district. It primarily centers around compatibility in details and materials and proportions. And I would think that, old red brick and I think you'll probably consider several types of roof style in the design study. If you go with a hip roof or a gable roof or something, it'll probably tend to make it look a little more residential, like the buildings to the north of it. And if you go with a flat roof, it's likely to make it look a little more like the more modern church across the street and
School to the,
yeah.
to the west.
Or you could go back to an historic callback to the original church and play around with that somehow. That would be interesting. Might be a bit much, but might be able to play with it a little, right? Inspired by it or something.
Yeah.
Well, go for it.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Okay.
You have our blessing so far.
Thanks for the support. Okay.
Excuse me.
Item 4 on the agenda is staff comments. Are there any?
No.
Oh,
We are good.
subterfuge.
I would offer one comment, and that's simply to congratulate the mayor on her reappointment as mayor of our city.
Suck up.
Yeah. Hope she's watching.
We do have a few. We do.
Item 5 on the agenda is commission member comments and discussion. Are there any?
No, I was speaking out of turn.
And we're in danger of maybe having the shortest meeting for some time now, so anybody want to invent something? Item 6 on the agenda is to call out the date of the next regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, which will be on December 20th, 2017. With that, could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved this time.
Have a motion from Mr. Coleman. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Nicely. I believe that makes us adjourned at 7:40.
Thanks, city staff.